I recently wanted to download a legacy update for the PSP so I could do things with the PSP. And I was struck by something that you wouldn't normally see online, but you're starting to see more and more, which was a tutorial that linked a file. Okay, sounds pretty normal so far. What the hell are you talking about? I'm sure you're wondering to yourself. Well, that file was not hosted on Mega Drive or Google Drive or even catbox.moe. It was hosted on Discord. It was a link to a file that someone posted on there. And this is more and more common. A lot of the time, these tutorials for translated or hacked games or updates for old things end up having the links to a file that's hosted on Discord. And it got me thinking. It got me thinking about a broader trend on the internet today that I think is greatly harmful, that is not explored when we typically talk about this platform, which is the death of forums. You see, back in the day, forums were kind of these hubs for knowledge, obscure, niche knowledge. You could search up a specific problem you had, and oftentimes the forums for whatever interests you had would show up, and somebody in the thread would provide novel information that could help you solve your problem. I think a great example of this would be something like the ThinkPad forums, because on the ThinkPad forums, you often have people creating new ways that you can modify your ThinkPad to get the most power out of it, or perhaps even change and adapt the BIOS in order to unleash the potential of the computer, like to say use an SSD and be able to access all the reading speeds on something like a T61. There are people who, on the ThinkPad forums, created a special modified BIOS to do exactly that. And without those forums being there in the first place, you probably would not have had a ragtag group of people doing exactly that, keeping this hardware afloat for longer than the developers initially intended. And that's one of the great things about organizing a public forum and having it all out in the open, because you not only gather a bunch of people together who have a specific interest to address specific problems and share their knowledge of said problems, you also are archiving that information forever. So people can go back to those forums to solve their own problems, and they come across it using a simple Google search. On Discord, however, you have a situation where all of the information is private. Sure, you can use something like Disboard to look up a server that is based on your interest or based on the specific problem you're trying to solve, but you have to search keywords all throughout the server. The way that it's organized is at the whims of the moderators, and you don't even necessarily know if they're going to be able to solve your problem. And what you end up running up against is a whole lot of time being wasted. And then you ask yourself, is it even worth searching the web in this way if the only way to do it is annoying, archaic, and obtuse? I wouldn't want to search the web like that. I would not. But that's how we're going to have to search the web in order to find a lot of information, or find out that we can't find the information. And so, Discord has created a black hole, information-wise, that forums used to fill up. But because those forums are no longer in use, now problems are going to become harder and harder to solve, and also files are going to become harder and harder to find. Because if all of the files for development projects, hacks, and so on are placed on this one website, what do you run into? You run into a situation where at any time that centralized server could choose to delete the file. If the server itself, as in the one that the mods control, is deleted, that file too could disappear at some point, which is terrible for archival. And this doesn't mention anything of the broader cultures that forums develop, like, say, the EVE Online forums. The reason why the story of EVE Online is so rich, it's not just because of the epic battles that have been archived by individual users and also taped. It's not just because the structure of the game is such that these large clans can form with their own unique histories. All of that is true, but EVE Online has the narrative potential that it has because people used the forums and because those forums can still be read to this day. You don't see that with Discord. You don't see that with Discord because it is all hidden in these private servers that, yes, you have the ability to join, but you don't even know what's in it unless you search through everything. And who wants to search through thousands of messages to be able to get a sense of the culture? Some of that may be lost because the moderators can delete individual channels at any time. And there could be lots of context that you simply never see because of that. On forums, banned users' posts don't usually get deleted. Typically, there's something that says that they're banned, but their posts tend to still be there. On Discord, there's a deleted user. You don't know who the hell they are. You can't really get a sense of what their contributions to the server are because it just says deleted user. The sense that you would get on forums of community and the public nature of that community is not possible to be found on Discord. And when you don't have search functionality like that in the public space, it becomes much more difficult to archive anything about these times in internet history, and indeed now, times in human history. Because at this point, the internet is so closely linked with our real lives in the real world that to know about internet culture and what is happening on the internet is also to know about what is happening in our real world. Because we live in a time now where the things that happen online go on to influence political campaigns, such as, when Ron DeSantis was running for president, he had like Groyper memes and black suns in his campaign ads that he was running on Twitter. Of course, the people who did those ads had to get axed, but, it came out that in their group chats, they were literally talking about Nick Fuentes and posting Groyper memes. I mean, these guys are extremely online, who are staffing the offices and campaigns of these politicians. And so that's one example of how the online world is affecting the real world. People who are extremely online have cleaned up their image and now gone on into the real world and are affecting it. They're changing it. And so we live in a time now where it is more important than ever to archive the events that happen on the internet. But what does Discord do? Discord makes it harder to do that. Discord makes it harder to know at what point in time XYZ internet group was forming itself, developing its own niche, developing its own language, its own lingo, gaining prominence. It's extremely difficult to save all of that with the way that Discord is structured. But these are groups that could be of immense consequence to the broader internet and to the real world as a result. And yet it's harder than ever to archive these things and store them. I think of the kid, the airman, who in his Nazi Discord server leaked a bunch of classified documents. Can you imagine if he did that on a public forum? And also if we were able to read all of the logs of the forum, all the posts, to get a sense for what that forum's culture was like? We would know a lot more about the Jack Teixeira case. We would know a lot more about what was going through the minds of the people who were reading these documents and the mind of the person leaking them. That was a consequential moment in human history because it went on to change the entire strategy of the Ukrainian army, because their counteroffensive plans were leaked to the public and thereby to Russia. It was consequential for the history of that war and therefore to the history of humanity. But we can't see all of the happenings in that Discord server because the Discord server's gone now. The guy who was the mod there is indicted on espionage charges. So there's no more server. We don't know what the hell was going on there. But imagine if that was a forum. Even if it were direct messages by the members of the forum in like a group, you could still look at the forum, all the culture surrounding the forum. Maybe us, the common citizens, would have a better sense of what the hell was going through the minds of the people. What they were joking about, what they were doing. And you can go on and on and on with examples. But the point here is that they are endless and more consequential than ever, the examples. But it is more difficult than ever to actually get a sense for these unique individual cultures online because they are more hidden than they used to be by the centralized platform known as Discord, which actively hides these things from the public view. They are not one Google search away, as they once were. And this also has effects on, fan translation projects, the hacking scene, people doing modifications for computers, people hosting files for, all manner of different things. Just think of how many images are not being stored on a public forum. All these different things are concentrated there, and they will live and eventually die there with no one to store them, with no one to archive them, with no one to save them. And as a result, we will be less knowledgeable of our own history.